they can ask. I told them they could ask questions as necessary. So I'll have to accept that or not. Okay, so Pashas Miketz. I want to just review something that was in Chadash in the last year. So we said like this. The pasuk says we're up to Perek Mem Aleph pasuk Mem Ches. That's where we're up to. But before we go into that pasuk, I want to review and summarize something that was in Chadash last year. The pasuk says that when Yosef interpreted the dream, starts in pasuk Chav Vav. Perek Mem Aleph pasuk Chav Vav. Where Yosef said the Sheva Paras HaTovis Sheva Shonim Heina. And then in the next pasuk, he says that the Sheva Paras HaRakis will be Sheva Shnei Ra'av. He doesn't make a point in pasuk Chavav that the Sheva Shonim will be Sheva Shnei Sava. Says the Ramban, because that's not a particular prediction of the dream, because in Mitzrayim that there should be Sava, that's the norm. So that wasn't what the dream was predicting, or that wasn't the chiddush of the dream. And that, we mentioned, is borne out from Pasuk Mem Zayin, we spoke about in the last year. Normally, when there's a dream interpretation, what happens is, he interprets the dream, and then the Pasuk says, and as he interpreted, so it came to pass. It makes a big deal out of that. Yeah, his interpretation came true. But here in Pasuk Mem Zayin, it says, Vatasa arts b'sheva shnei asava l'kmotzim, without saying, Vahikash ha'pasa Yosef kein haya vatechileno, and there were Sheva Shnei Sava. But then, later, in Pasuk Nun Dalid, where it gets to the Shnei Ra'av, there it says, Kasher Amar Yosef. Because that's his prediction. That's his prediction. The prediction of Yosef was that there will be a Rav. That's a Chiddush. Normally when there's a Rav, in Pashas Lachman, Pashas told us, you go down to Mitzrayim, where there's a Sava. Okay? Fine. Now, furthermore, what we said was, and this I just want to review and put it together, the fact is, the pasuk describes it as a Sava Gadol. Pasuk of Tes. Sava Gadol. So it seems like it was an extraordinary Sava. Something unusual. So the solution is like this, and this is what we discussed in the last year. In Pasuk Mem Zayin, what? No, it says Sava Gadol. It sounds like it's something special, unique. It sounds like there is something unique.
So then it should have said
Kasher Amar Yosef, that there was in fact a Sava Gadol, right? Now, so if you look in Pasuk Mem Zayin, this is what we spoke about last year. Kmotzim means handfuls. Handfuls, koimetz. So what's the Pasuk saying? There's different pshatim in the Mefarshim. What we spoke about was the Pasuk says in Mishlei, Hoin mehevel yimot, v'koivetz al yad yarbe. It's in Mishlei Pekad Yom Pasuk Alef. Hoin mehevel yimot. A fortune that comes out of Hevel will eventually be lost. The kovetz al yad, if you collect hand by hand, one hand at a time, yarbe, then you'll have a lot. And what that means is like this. If we'll get to what it means in a moment. But so the Tushtel is to this pasuk that Yosef achieved the riboy, l'kmotzim, by collecting tefua one hand at a time. And so what that means is like this. That means is if you want to be rich, what's the pasuk saying? The pasuk is saying like this: everyone wants to be rich. Everyone wants a hain. But hain is an abstraction, right? You want to be rich. That's just an abstraction. It's not tangible. The only thing that's tangible is what's in your hand. At any moment. You have this, you have this, you have this. If you machshav what's in your hand, if you machshav the riches, the wealth that's in your hand, then you will amass riches because you machshav each and every piece of wealth. But if you're like most people, they don't really care about any specific item. They don't have a cheshik, they don't have a chukah, they don't have appreciation for any specific piece of wealth. They just want hain, so that's hevel, because it's just an idea, it's an abstraction, and you're never going to achieve that. Why? Because hain is made up of one yad and another yad. So this is what Yosef taught to Mitzvah. He taught them Mishlei, and he told them, look, Mitzrayim is a place of Sava. So it's a Sava. Every year they had just enough food to live very comfortably. Yosef is going to teach them that it's actually a Sava Gadol, and you could put away 20%. How did he teach them that? By making them appreciate each yad al yad. And then what happened was, suddenly there was more tefuah than we expected. Why? Because a lot of it didn't go to waste. People were appreciating the tefuah that they had. While normally they don't appreciate a handful of tefuah. So 20% went to waste, and everyone was happy, and everything was great. So Yosef took from a Sava Ragil, and he made it into a Sava Gadol. So therefore, and the truth is, even without the Sava Gadol, the fact is there is an implication that part of the dream is that there's going to be a Sava. That is the mashmas, right? And is it normal for there to be a Sava? In other words, what's the dream? The Ramban says normal for there to be a Sava. So really the dream is that in 8 years from now there's going to be a Rav. Doesn't quite sound like that, right? Sounds like the first 7 years are also meaningful. But they are meaningful because Yosef made them meaningful on the day his plan and the specific way he executed it. He made normal years into special years, and therefore they became important a part of the dream, right? So that's what Yosef taught them. Yosef taught them the kmatzim. Okay. Fine. That's what we spoke about. Just to review, I don't know if we said this in this year, that
also what makes the dream happen quicker.
Exactly. Yosef said, "Ki nochen hadavar me'imher elikim, u'memaher elikim la'asosei." Okay. Now, Yosef said nochen hadavar, but it wasn't nochen because it didn't happen as Yosef predicted. There were 7 years of Sava, and there were only 2 years of Rav because Yaakov came and brought an end to the Rav with his bracha. So it wasn't nochen. This we spoke about, and there are also psukim that fault Yosef for his insistence that it's maher, that it's memaher elikim la'asosei. Pasuk in Kehela says, "Libcha ali maher lahotzidav lefnei elikim," because Hashem is in the Shemayim and you are in the Aretz, and therefore you're just a dreamer, and the Chaloim is B'roev Inyan, Kol K'so B'roev Dvarim, and things don't have if you need to come on to dreams, which means Hashem is in Shemayim and you're in the Aretz and you don't have Nevuah, then you should understand that you can't be so certain of things. And that's
what does it mean that Yosef was saying that?
Yosef was telling Paro, it's happening very soon, so we have to get to work.
Whereas, I mean, the dream said they're going to have years. It would be
so 1 second. No, because let's say the 7 years of Sava don't have any meaning. But let's say the 7 years of Sava were regular years, which is what Rabban says. So then the dream is basically Paro is standing by a calendar, flipping the calendar 7 years, and then there's a hunger. That's not memahar l'kim la'asosei. That's a prediction that in 8 years is going to be a hunger. But Yosef took the 7 years of Sava, and he made that into very important. He made the message of those 7 years very important by saying that those 7 years are going to turn into a Sava Gadol and are going to be the method by which we prepare for the Sheva Shnei Rav. So according to Yosef's plan, it's true that memahar l'kim la'asosei, but that's only because of Yosef's plan. But if Yosef would have taken another route, let's say saying, guys, it's going to be a Rav in 8 years and there's nothing I can do for you, and Mitzrayim is having a downfall and you're toast, then that wouldn't be memahar either. Okay? And what it says in Mizmor Kuf Mem Zayin, Haluka Kitev Zayin Malakenu is all connected our Pash. We're talking about that again tonight. We're going to talk about that again now, but I wanted to add two things. That in that Mizmor it says, Hamechin La'aretz Matar, and it talks about the Dvar Hashem that runs down on Mehira Yaretz Devari, right? The Pesukim at the end of the Mizmor, on Mehira Yaretz Devari, and there it says Shalech Ibrasei Aretz, and it talks about Yishlach Devar V'Yamsim, it talks about the rain. What's the Pasuk going? Anyone remember? Noisin Shalek Hatzameh, Kvar Kev Yefazeh, Masha Kach Chvitim, Nekrosim Yamid, Yishlach Devar V'Yamsim. Okay, and so it talks about the word of Hashem coming quickly, and then Magid Dvar of Yaakov is of course the word of Hashem, and also talks about the rain that comes down from the Shemayim, like it says in Yeshai, Kikasha Yerd HaGeshem Hashem Shemayim Kenya Dvari. So the mashal for a word that comes from Shemayim is the rain, and the word of Hashem comes quickly. That comes quickly. The word of Hashem, which is like rain, and Meichen La'aretz Matar. Mitzrayim is the non-rain place, right? And here they're finally getting a Rav, which they normally didn't have. But Yosef was saying, no, it's Beseder. The wealth of Mitzrayim, which is not the wealth of rain, is going to preserve them. We're going to save Mitzrayim from their own wealth, which is really not Nochen and really not Maher, as it says in Mizmor Kuf Mem Zayin. You want Nochen and Maher, you really need Meichen La'aretz Matar. And Shabbat Yerushalayim is Hashem. Okay? And Mehir Yaretz Devar. Got that?
That part of the...
No, that Yosef said Nochen and Maher.
Right.
So that means he's saying that the salvation of Mitzrayim, which he's going to be instrumental in that, is coming from Hashem. Hashem has a plan, and the plan is that Mitzrayim should be saved through Yosef. And what it says in Mizmor Kuf Mem Zayin, where it talks about, let's say, where it talks about this sort of an anti-Yosef thing. We'll speak about that a little more later. There it says Mechin and Maher, but those are about the rain. The rain is how Hashem gives parnasa to Eretz Yisrael, not to Mitzrayim. So here Yosef is guaranteeing the Shloim Paroi and the parnasa of Mitzrayim through the wealth of Mitzrayim, through the Sav of Mitzrayim. And he's saying, I could take the Sav of Mitzrayim and turn it into a Sav of Gadol by teaching them Kmatzim, and then Mitzrayim will be saved Minei Ubei, without recourse, without recognizing that Hashem is going to destroy them and they have big tzaras and they have to do something about it, which is the derech of Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is Olol Rav, right? Mitzrayim, we spoke about this, that Mitzrayim right now, let's say Yosef would have said, you guys have a Rav coming and there's nothing I can do for you. There would never be the pasuk that says that Eretz Yisrael is like Eretz Mitzrayim. In Eretz Mitzrayim, they have a river. In Eretz Yisrael, you need rain, and V'hayim Shemot Tishmur. Look, Mitzrayim also, the river didn't work because they had a Rav and they fell apart until, I don't know what happened, until they did tshuva and until Yaakov Avinu came and gave them a bracha because he has Yerushalayim, right? That's what it says in Mizrach Kofem Zayin. We'll speak about this again later. It says Loi b'gvura asos yachab tzaloi b'shoykei yeshi. It's a roitz Hashem Yisirev. Because there's 2 times that someone stood in front of Paroi and ended the Rav. Yosef was ben shloishim shana ba'omdei lifnei Paroi, and Yaakov, they were ma'amid Yaakov lifnei Paroi, and he was meo shloishim shana. Yosef took care of the Rav by his great resourceful ideas of hustling for 7 years and collecting everything. And Yaakov took care of the Rav by giving a bracha. Right? Keneged Zeh it says, Loi b'gvuras asos yachbatz loi b'sheker yeshi. It says, sheker, Yosef is 30, sorry, that's Yosef is 30. What's the significance of Yosef being 30 and Yaakov being 130? Because it says in Daniel that they would have to find youths, they were looking for young men from Yehuda that have koyach la'amoid b'heichal HaMelech. So that's Yosef who's oimel lifnei Paroi. When he's 30, he's a ben shloishim lekoyach. Right? He has the energy that Nebuchadnezzar told his guys to go to find from the captives of Yehuda young men who have koyach la'amoid b'heichal HaMelech. Koyach la'amoid, because you have to stand in the court, you have to have koyach la'amoid. So Yosef is oimid. That means he has koyach, he's ben shloishim. And look, he has koyach to serve the king, and he's going to serve him industriously for 7 years by doing a lot, by putting his energy into the plan to save Mitzrayim. Loi v'sheker he'ish yirtzeh. Sheker he'ish is the koyach la'amoid. Right, Hashem Yisirev. Yaakov, it doesn't stand in front of Paroi. Yaakov is very amidehu lifnei Paroi. He's 100 years older than Yosef, so he doesn't have koyach anymore. But what he has is yira, and therefore he ends the Rav through chastoi, l'me'achnu chastoi. And in Mizmor Lamed Gimel, which is also muchavan to this, we'll speak about that also tonight. It says the same thing. Sheker asus l'shua, ve'ivchol le'olam alit. Hine Hashem elirev l'machal hasil hatzim l'chayos and barav. So not the sus, right? Like big sus yach, but Mitzrayim's power is sus. Yosef is taking his sheker ha'ish together with Mitzrayim's power. He says, look, between me and you, Paroi, we're fine. Elikim yana eshleim Paroi. You have me. I'm a young man. I'm ready to roll. And you have Mitzrayim's, everything that Mitzrayim brings to the table, the gvuras asus, and I'm going to make it work. And that's, and the pasuk saying that's sheker asus, and loy b'gvuras asus yachbatz. Rather, words Hashem Yisrael. And the reason why it's sheker is because Yosef said sheker, because Yosef said Nochon Atav Elokim, and actually not. It's not just that Yosef did it one way and Yaakov did it another way. Yaakov's way superseded Yosef's because it made it into sheker, right? Because the Ma'aseh, no, it wasn't Nochon Atav Elokim, and that's Mechel Oretz Motor, and not Meher Yoretz Devar. If you want the Dvar Hashem, that has to come from the rain. Okay, that was we're supposed to get that later, but that's fine. You know that's important to note for later. But I wanted to say that, so that's what Yosef did. Yosef saw his role as being what he's going to do for Paroi, as being part of the message of the dream. Why did he see that? That's earlier Shurim. Yosef understood that his role is part of the message of the dream, and therefore he, by interpreting the dream in such a way that the dream is mechayev for someone to take action immediately, therefore the dream becomes memar lakim la'asosei. Okay. So Yosef took the Sava, which on the one hand sounds like it's a normal Sava, on the other hand sounds like it was significant because Yosef made it significant, because Yosef understood that he has a role to play. And if he has a role to play, that means a Ma'ar Lakim L'Asosei, that means something's happening very quickly. Okay, so that's the Kmatzim. I just want to add to that, the Kmatzim, that Yosef is teaching them, Kovetz al Yad Yarbe, and you have the pasuk stresses that Paroi took the tabas off his Yad and put it onto Yosef's Yad. And also it says later in Parashas, I think it's in Vayigash, where it says that Yosef everyone took 1/5 for themselves, and Arba Hayodos, the Paroi. So he was teaching them to misyaches to the wealth through this musik of the Yad, and that way they'll be able to find an extra chaimish. Okay. Good. Now let's go to Pasuk Memches. Vayik boitz. So through Yosef collecting. I'm sorry, I want to add one thing before. So there's 3 Mizmorim in Tehillim that are connected this parsha. All of them mechoven in completely. Lamed Gimel, Ranu Tzadikim B'Hashem, Leishom Navasila. Pei Aleph, Lamed said this morning. Yosef goes out to Mitzrayim, right? Haninu L'Elokim Bozenu, L'Elokim Yaakov, It is Yosef Some Tzei Mitzrayim, Shasi Adat Yeshem, etc., etc. And Kufim Zayin. And in Mizmor Pei Aleph it says that Hashem tells Edis B'Yosef Some B'Tzei Mitzrayim. Hashem took him out of bondage. Batzar Karasav Akatzecha, call me in Tzara and I will save you. Right? Batzar Karasav Akatzecha. Lo Yevechel Zar, Anoich Hashem Lekech Makam Lotzem Harchev Picha V'Malehu. Harchev Picha V'Malehu. Just open your mouth wide and I will fill it up. So Yosef here is figuring out a way to, and there it ends, like it says in Kuf Mem Zayin, the Chelev Chita is supposed to go to Yerushalayim. Here Yosef promised to Parai the Chelev Chita, and really it's supposed to go to Yerushalayim. We'll talk about that more today. It says in Kuf Mem Zayin. And there it says in Pei Aleph, Lu Ami Sheme'ali Kim Ato Yvei Machaniya Val Tzavei Mashiv Yadi. So anti would save Yerushalayim, Yisrael, and not the enemies. But he fed him from the Chelev Chita, which I think means Yosef, really you're supposed to just follow Hashem, who says, don't work with Mitzrayim. Get out of Mitzrayim. Tell Paro, I don't want to have anything to do with you. I'm leaving. I left jail and now I'm leaving Mitzrayim. Yosef is getting freed now, so he could have been completely freed. But no, he doesn't do that. If they would listen to me, then they wouldn't have to worry about the enemies. But he, Yosef, fed Paro Chelev Chita, which is really supposed to be for Yerushalayim, not for the enemies. Okay? And there it says in Mizmor Pei Aleph, instead of, so here Yosef has this way of saving money and being full, which is L'kmotzim, and then the next pasuk is Vayikboitz. So komatz and kovatz are related because it means to take a small amount and collect, to hold. Harchev Picha is opposite. So you don't have to hold anything, you don't have to close. Open your mouth wide and Hashem will fill it. So that's like Roitz Hashem Yisireyov, Menachem L'chastei, right? Like it says in Kofam Zayin, because there it says Hashem gives food to the behemoth of Bnei Oyev Asher Yikra'u. So all you have to do is call to Hashem. Batzar Karasa, Harchev Picha, open your mouth to call to Hashem. And then that's like, how about the Harchev is connected, the Kmotzim and Vayikboitz. Vayikboitz, pasuk mem ches. Vayikboitz es kol oichel sheva shodim asher hoyu be'eretz Mitzrayim. All the food of 7 years that were. So again, the pasuk doesn't stress that the 7 years were unique, but it says a very interesting lashon asher hoyu be'eretz Mitzrayim, that were, which I think suggests, like we were saying, that the 7 years were not inherently unique kinds of years, but they became something because Yosef made them into something. Right? He took 7 years, which were be'etzem stam 7 years. But they were 7 years asher hayu because Yosef made them into a significant 7 years. Vayitin oichel be'arim. Oichel sedehu yashes yosem nasam b'seichel. So the pasuk stresses that Yosef took the food and he put it into the cities, and then he took it from the surroundings, from around the cities, and he put it into the cities. Right? So what is the significance? What are we supposed to understand about the cities getting their food from their surroundings? From Moshe, and there's Tanakh if anyone needs. I think we might need to. I mean, you know the psukim, but. Okay, so let's talk about Mizmor Kofem Zayin. You know the Psukim really, but the Tanakh is there if you want. In Mizmor Kofem Zayin, as we mentioned earlier, it talks about what Hashem desires and what He doesn't desire. He doesn't want Vuras HaSus. He doesn't want Shoykei Ish. Rather, He wants Yireov. And therefore, Shabchi Yerushalayim es Hashem. Therefore, Yerushalayim should praise Hashem. That's the place of Yireov, right? Ki chizak b'chei sha'aroich b'ech menayich b'kibech. He's strengthening the sha'arim, the bolts, the bars on the sha'arim are strengthened. How? How is there peace? So you see that Yerushalayim is strengthened when it has chelev chita. How does it get shalom? Asam gevulach shalom. How does it protect it from the enemies? Because it could withstand an onslaught. I guess that's the meaning. A siege, right. So therefore it's at peace. It could just lock its doors and everything's fine. And that's we have the same thing in Mizmor Pei Aleph. Kimat Ovei Machania, Ashiv Yadi, that Yisrael could have Chelev Chita, and then they don't have to worry about their Oivim. Right? And in Mizmor Kuvem Zayin, it's saying, you know who's supposed to have the Chelev Chita? B'nei Yerushalayim Hashem, Nitchei Yisrael Lechan, Shabchi Yerushalayim Hashem. And the Berach B'nayich Bekirbech, we spoke about this last year. Berach B'nayich Bekirbech, Yaakov, who's the Roitz Hashem Yisrael, V'machem L'chasto, he brings an end to the Rav. He doesn't bring an end to the Rav when he's in Eretz Canaan by himself. We're missing Yosef. He only could bring an end to the Rav when it's Berach B'nayich Bekirbech, when he's back united with the Shvatim and Shabchi Yerushalayim, B'nei Yerushalayim Hashem, Nitchei Yisrael Lechanis. Yerushalayim is united Yisrael, united nation. So when Yaakov is reunited, that's when you can have Roitz Hashem Yisrael, and that's when you have the true realization of what Hashem really wants. It's not Gvuras, so it's not Shaykish, which was necessary in the meantime when Yosef is in Mitzrayim and you don't have Klal Yisrael united, so you didn't have a proper Yireov, you didn't have proper Chastoi, so you had to do something B'diavad, Gvuras Asus, Shaykish, but that's not really what Hashem wants. And once Nidchei Yisrael Lechanes, then Kimat Evei Machnia, you don't have to worry about the enemies anymore. This says in Pei Aleph. So that's the point over here, that Yosef is strengthening. Yosef is not merely he's not merely saving Mitzrayim from Rav. He's strengthening the cities of Mitzrayim, and that's what the Mizmor is contrasting. The ideal city that's supposed to have the Chelev Chita and be protected from its enemies is Yerushalayim. So, and the enemies of the cities are, as the pasuk numerous places talks about, enemies that are misaviv, right? Enemies could come around. So if you have to protect yourself from enemies around, you have to what's the word I'm looking for? To strengthen the city? Fortify. Thank you. You have to fortify the city through Chelev Chitim. You want to have shalom from the enemies that are saviv.
Well, how's Chelev Chitim strengthen the city?
Because then it could stand a siege.
Well,
and
they have food.
And also perhaps because then the enemies need you, because you have the riches, maybe like in Mitzrayim. So Yosef is not merely preserving Mitzrayim; he's also fortifying the cities. Meaning, and this reading is based on Kofem Zayin, where it talks about which city is supposed to be Chizak B'Chasharoich through the Chelev Chita, that's Yerushalayim, not the Gvusas, not Shekesh. So here Yosef is doing something that's going to benefit. And bring peace to the cities, which is consistent with the fact that Yosef is the one who is underwriting Shloim Parei. So how does he underwrite Shloim Parei? He says, I'm going to make your cities into these powerful cities that can withstand any enemy.
And take away the food from the surrounding areas and put it in the cities, so you're giving power to the king rather than the
plebs. Chayr.
Yeah.
Right. Now, interestingly, we know that Bnei Yisrael built Orei Miskenois, the Parai, and Orei Miskenois says in Divrei Yomim Beis, Parak Lamed Beis, Pasuk Chav Ches, talks about a different building project. You don't have to look it up, but talks about Chizkiyahu who built Miskenois L'Tfuas Dagon Tirush V'Yitzah. So Miskenois is storage cities, like it says in Targum, and the pasuk in Divrei Yomim, the other place in Torah we have Miskenois, where it talks about storages of Tfuas Dagon. So the fact that Orei and Miskenois, these cities of Mitzrayim, are these cities where these stockpiles of grain. So it's something about the cities. Okay. Another thing about the cities. Another parak we're talking about a lot is Yeshaya parak Yutes. Keneged our Parsha, and there it talks about Vayemahu. There's going to be 5 cities in the land of Mitzrayim where they speak this Sfas Canaan, and Nishbaz Hashem Tzavakas. Yosef hears, as the pasuk says, Sfas Lo Yadat Yesh, but they weren't speaking this Sfas Canaan. One day there's going to be cities in Mitzrayim that do speak this Sfas Canaan. Point is that there it says about the cities. Okay, so in our Parsha is something about the cities of Mitzrayim, and the cities of Mitzrayim are not the cities of Canaan. One day they will be, but right now they're not. And therefore, the Mizmor says, B'nei Yerushalayim Hashem Nitchei Yisrael Lechanis, which city should have everything that Yosef gave to the Gvuras Asus, is really Yerushalayim, the city of Yereav. Yes, please. Now, one more thing. Just careful not to knock this, because it could be delicate. Okay. Pasuk says like this. The next pasuk says, "Vayitbar Yosef bar kechol hayom harbe me'od ad ki chodal espar v'kein espar." We're going to go into that pasuk in a minute, but the next pasuk talks about the chol being uncountable, the bar being uncountable, not having a number, and then the pasuk after that says, "And Yosef had 2 children." So it's right. The bar was uncountable. Well, the Yosef yulad shnei banim. So this is something we spoke about. That really, who's supposed to be kechol hayom? Bnei Yisrael, right? And but Yosef yulad shnei banim. That means the riboy is in the wrong place. The riboy is in the wrong place, and in fact, the riboy of Yosef is v'yidgul aroiv b'karev ha'aretz, which, as I think it's the one Legoin says, shows that Ephraim and Menashe only increased numerically when they came to Eretz Yisrael, unlike everyone else who increased in Mitzrayim. Shevet Ephraim and Menashe, that's why it says in Sefer Yeshua, they came to Yeshua and said, we increased so much, we don't have space anymore. Why? Because when the original numbers didn't match with the numbers when they came to Eretz Yisrael, that's when they started increasing and they had a problem with the Nachal. Okay, Akapanim, so Yosef, so the riboy is in the wrong place.
They weren't less than any of the other Shvatim in Keanu.
No? Yeah. Yes, I don't know. Okay. So like this. So Right? Hashem counts the Kechavim, and Hashem counts Bnei Yisrael, who are Kechavim. Yeah. This is very complicated. I want to go to something else. So, I think we'll skip this. I'll just say very bekitz and difference. Okay? Mamish bekitz and difference. So, the riboy of Bnei Yisrael, the right riboy is when Bnei Yisrael are many. And they are the Kechavim. They are like the Kechavim. And the pasuk says that Hashem counts the Mizpah like Kechavim, and He's ready for the Shrei Leiv. Okay? Fine. So, I'm not going to go into that. That's the correct riboy here. Yosef has the bad riboy. Fine. Next pasuk. Let's go. There's something else I want to get to. So he had harbe ma'od, but he couldn't count it. Okay, he couldn't count it. Now, what does it say in Mizmor Kufim Zayin? Hashem does count the Kechavim. Why does Hashem count the Kechavim? Because l'sfunasai ein mispar. So in order to count the Kechavim that are really ein mispar, from our perspective, you have to have an ein mispar to the Tfuna, which is a shtickle dig at Yosef, because Yosef is the ish novoin v'chacham. But his Tvuna has a mispar, so therefore he couldn't count the bar, right? The only one who could count something that's in mispar is someone who's Tvuna say in mispar. And Godel Adnein v'Rav Koyach. Yosef's big thing is that he has Koyach over here. He's the Koyach. He's Ben Shleshim LeKoyach, but he's not Rav Koyach, at least to be able to match up to L'Svuna say in mispar. And count something that's uncountable. Okay? And same thing you have in Mizmor Lamed Gimel. What does it say about Rav Koyach in Mizmor Lamed Gimel? Anyone remember? Sheka Asus L'Shuv V'Chil Lo Yamalit. What's the pasuk before that? Loi. Let's see. Eina Melch Noshe B'Rav Chayil. Gibra Lo Yinotza B'Rav Koyach. Sheka Asus L'Shuv V'Chil Lo Yamalit. Hine Eina Hashem Eloheinu V'Machal L'Chaste. Okay. So, that's the bad Rav. Rav Chayil, Rav Koyach, Rav Chayil. Rav Chayil. That doesn't work. What does work is Godel Adoninu of Rav Koyach and Mo'edid Anovim Hashem. The Anovim don't have Rav Chayil, Rav Koyach, but they're Yereim. Okay? Good. Now I want to move on to something else. Okay, I was rushing a little bit till this because I wanted to get to this point. Okay, that's all for the psukim for now. Now I want to talk about something general. Okay, yeah. I want to talk about something general. Yosef guarantees Shloim Parei. And he basically, he as we've been discussing, he locks himself into this cooperation with Parei, which is supports Geburas Asus and Shoykeish. And what does it mean it supports? It should be very clear. How does Yosef guarantee Shloim Parei in advance? How does he say that everything's going to be fine? He's basically affirming that the Mahalach of Mitzrayim is legitimate. Is supposed to have a kiyum. And therefore he believes in it. He's basically giving his affirmation of its value and saying, I believe in the Mahalach of Mitzrayim and everything's going to be fine, which is Ka'ived Avodah Zarah. That's why it says in Mizmor Pei Aleph, Lo Yevacha El Zav L'Shtach V'Lech Nechar. We had other, and that's why it says in Yeshaya there's going to be 5 cities where they speak Sfas Kanan and Nishba'is L'Hashem Tzavakos. Because it's supporting the whole Mitzri Mahalach.
Which is not telling Hashem.
Right. Exactly. And that's why Hadar B'chutza, it's Ka'ived Avodah Zarah, because we spoke about have a mispala b'shloim Shamachas because a molam erah ishis ve'irchaim beloi. So the Morka is from Yosef, who said l'kim yana shloim pari because he saw the lesson from the dreams about Tivlano. Right, one cow swallowing up the other one alive. That's what happens if you don't have shloim malchus. But shloim malchus, shalom is the shem shemayim. That means the true shalom is Mashiach. What do you mean davening for shloim malchus? That says you're stuck. You have no choice. Daven Mashiach, but if it doesn't come, what are you going to do then? So you have to.
Even
So you have to live in Chutz La'aretz, which is K'sav Avodah Zarah.
Yaakov gives the bracha to Pharaoh.
No, that's very different. Don't touch that. Don't touch that. Careful with the cord. No, that's very different. That's very different. The bracha of Yaakov to Parai is Roitz Hashem Es Yireah V'Simach L'Mechastoi. See, that's the point. The point is when Yaakov gave Parai bracha, it destabilized the whole mitzvah society, because the whole mitzvah society was based on we're strong, right? And Yosef Taka said, you Taka strong. Hagam the Rav, you're still strong, because you're strong enough that you could even withstand a Rav. Yaakov came and said, I'm calling upon Hashem. And what is this new thing? Whatever. It doesn't work for Mitzrayim. He only did it because he's Bnei Yerushalayim Nitchei Yisrael Chanis. When Yaakov is together with the Shvatim, then they're representing Yerushalayim. It's representing this non-Mitzri Mahal. Okay? I think it's very different. So it's Hashem Esireh, it doesn't support the Mitzri project. I think it's destabilizing to it. A lot of Mitzrim were started serving whatever, started thinking about it. We should serve Hashem, and I don't know. They've all some weird ideas.
A new paradigm.
Yeah, exactly.
Undermining the old one.
It undermined it, right? So it's Kavod Avodah Zarah. By the way, see, it's a very interesting thing. I realized today it's mutter to be Kavod Avodah Zarah. It's mamish because in the same parak in the Ramach it says mutter lishkan b'chol ha'olam kulai, except for at Mitzrayim, parenthetically, and it also says that if you go to Chutzah, it's Kavod Avodah Zarah, but it's mutter. I'm glad it says Yotze l'Chutzah. It's okay, but akapanim, it's mutter to be Kavod Avodah Zarah, and sometimes you have to be that. But Lamaisa, if you're working with Mitzrayim, you're Kavod Avodah Zarah. Right? If Yosef would have said, I don't believe in anything about you guys, I'm not interested, I don't belong here, I don't want to be here, get me back to my country, which he sort of tried that to begin with, right? But this Amash, going after Ephraim, whatever, he really wants to go home. But now he doesn't want to go home. He's very happy in Paro's court. And for Ked, he finds himself a very good job in Paro's court. So he's working with Mitzrayim. So that's a little bit of a desire. Meaning to say, right, it's working with a different Mahalach than Hashem. Okay. And the Nevi'im are very upset at Yosef for promising Shalom Pareh. All Micha, Yirmiyah, who else? Shaya and Shalom. Yeah, Shaya also. Yeah. Because what are you giving Shalom to Pareh for? Right? What are you doing? And that's what it says in Mizmor Kofam Zayin. Some Gevulech Shalom. Right? The Shalom is supposed to go to your Gvul. Elamai, you're worried about your enemies? You just, right? If you do right Hashem Yisrael and everything, don't worry about the enemies. You don't have to work with Mitzrayim at all. But Yosef shifts it to Mitzrayim. So the way we spoke till now, I'm saying that Yosef is sort of stuck in Mitzrayim. Whatever, is Yosef at fault? He's not at fault. Till now we spoke about the one thing. The Yosef is doing something which the Nevi'im say is not perfect. It's imperfect. Whether he had no other choice, maybe he had no other choice. But he's doing something that's imperfect. In other words, the Nevi'im represent the Dvar Hashem, and we can know the Dvar Hashem, and we can live with the Dvar Hashem Legambri, and Yosef is not doing that. He's doing something that's antithetical to that. I don't care if it's his fault or not. That's not my concern. Okay, that's what we discussed till now. However, I had a question. That you know who says to daven for Shlomo Shalmachos? And you know really who made a whole point of that?
Yeah.
Who?
Yes,
but it comes to the Nevi'im.
Yirmiyah.
Yirmiyah. No, Yirmiyah. You do something else. Yirmiyah says it before. Take a look in Yirmiyah. Perek. Is it? Perek of Tes. I have two kashas from Yirmiyah Perek of Tes. This is the message that Yirmiyah sent to Bavel. Yirmiyah Perek of Tes is a message that he sent to Bavel, telling them, look at Pasuk Daled. Koyam Hashem tzvokes l'chol hagoyla. Build houses, plant gardens. Kichu nashim v'alidu barabu banis. V'kru levnei nashim, etc. Urevusham v'al tematu. You should increase in Bavel and don't be mismai. V'dirshu eshloim ha'ir asher glesi esem shama. V'zbalu ba'ado el Hashem. Ki v'shloim ha'ir lechem shalom. So here in the Navi it says, Yirmiyah, who in other places is very upset about this business of giving shalom to Parei, at what Yosef did. Here he says that if you're in Galus, you have to daven for the shloima. It's very interesting how he says Bisbal Ba'ad El Hashem. It's very interesting. Atu what? Atu Merodach Baal, whatever his name was, the god of the Baalvim. Versteht sich not. No, but he says Bisbal Ba'ad El Hashem. Okay, which is I think part of the answer. And then if you look at the next pasuk, it says, "Don't listen to the dreamers." Right? Don't listen to the dreamers, which is Yirmiyah's big thing against Yosef in Perek Beis. Yosef is a dreamer, and he mixes Tevin and Bar. Mala Tevin as Bar. Bar represents the Dvar Hashem, and the Tevin represents the Dvar B'Telem. And Chaloimus are like a mixing Tevin and Bar, which is why the Shvatim hated Yosef. Al Chaloimusav, Al Devarav. Don't mix Chaloimus with a Davar. There's a Davar is a Davar, Chaloim is a Chaloim, and never the two shall meet. That's what Yirmiyah says also. Davar is the Dvar Hashem. Don't pretend that a dreamer is a Navi. And here the dreamers were telling them there's going to be peace. And Yirmiyah says, it's not going to be peace. You're not coming back to Israel. You're going to be there for 70 years. Dirshu Eshloim Ha'ir. The city, right? Good, nice city, wonderful city, make it into a great city. Exactly what Yosef did. Eichel Ba'arim. V'spalu ba'ad el Hashem. And they can have shalom. So, how does that stem? Now, it's interesting is also we have over there, look at the next psukim, it talks about when the Pekida is going to be, right? It's similar, again, like Yosef. There's going to be a Pekida from Mitzrayim. Pasuk Yud talks about there's going to be a Pekida in 70 years. And there, okay, what? Good, that's my question. Fine, that's the question. So I think the answer is like this. Take a look.
Another option?
Oh, 1 second. Yeah, that's a good question.
So maybe it's relative.
Right. But the thing is, what? You guys have had another option.
Yeah.
Okay, what was his other option?
I don't know.
Right, maybe he had another option. Right, that's an interesting point. I want to show you what's happening here in Yirmiyah. I think there's a different answer, which maybe is related to that. Take a look at Pasuk Yud Aleph. Let's read Pasuk Yud and Yud Aleph. Ki choya ma Hashem, ki lefi malois lebavel shim shona efkod eskem, ki moisi aleichem es dvori hatoiv lahoshev eskem l'makom hazeh. Ki anochi yodati es hamachshavos, asher anochi choshev aleichem lam Hashem, machshavos shalom v'loi levra'ah, laseis lachem achar v'sisikfor. Kurosim oisiv halachtem es balaltem alav shemati eskem mitzosim v'kashim k'shunikim, etc. Everything's going to be fine and you're going to come back in 70 years. And those are the machshavos that Hashem says, I know, anochi yodati es machshavos. What does it mean anochi yodati es machshavos? Why is he saying anochi yodati es machshavos? Because it's only machshavos, it's not dvarim. In other words, it's not something that's apparent. Everything seems to be bleak. You're in Bavel, you don't see the way out. Because there's no davar, there's no navi that's telling you, look, this is happening, that's happening, and you could understand. You can't understand it. You can't understand what's happening. The way it looks is that you're talking Galus. But Hashem, the Navi is telling you that Hashem has secret thoughts, machshavos, that he's not speaking out. And those machshavos are toiv, not ra. Okay? So there's something called the davar, the dvar Hashem, and there's something called the machshavos of Hashem. And the machshavos of Hashem is when the davar is not apparent, but there's something very important here, which is that the Navi told you that there are machshavos of Hashem. Okay? And this makes all the difference. And I'll explain to you why. But first, if you remember in Yeshaya, Perek Lamed, Perek Lamed, we spoke about this Pesukah Malat. In Yeshaya, at the beginning of Perek Lamed, he faults the Bnei Yisrael who go down to Mitzrayim without asking Hashem's Eitzah, without the Ruach Hashem. They don't ask the Pi Hashem, and they take refuge in Mitzrayim. And this in Parei. And this is referring to Yosef and the Shvatim. Yosef went down to Mitzrayim, but it was without the Pi Hashem. It's without the Pi Hashem, because what the Shvatim did to him was not consistent with the Dvar Hashem. In other words, right? They wanted to sell him because they believed you shouldn't be dreamers, you should rather be Nevi'im. But then when they sold him, they themselves lost the Dvar Hashem, as it says in Micha, as it says in Amos. And that's what the pasuk is saying by Yisro and by Yiru. That's a failed nevuah, because they were supposed to see it one way, they didn't see it another way. They lost their ability to be nevi'im. So the descent to Mitzrayim happened without the Pi Hashem, and that's the big problem. When the Navi tells you When the Navi tells you like this, here's the Dvar Hashem. The Dvar Hashem is that there will not be a Dvar Hashem for 70 years. Well, what will there be? So what's going to happen? There's going to be machshavos. That means avada, everything is a toiv. Avada, there is an achris v'tikva, as it says in Yirmiyah, right? When the Navi could talk and explain, that's when the davar is begali. That's when there's a mahalach called a mahalach of davar. When the Navi says there is no davar, then there's a mahalach called machshava. Okay? Chod. What do you do when there's machshava? What does that mean, there's machshava? It means that the derech of Hashem, the Dvar Hashem, is not usable, it's not manifest. Instead, what do you have to do? How do you live when there's no Dvar Hashem? You have to live with what's called shleim shamachos. You need some alternative to the Dvar Hashem. We call it the shivim sarim, and their mahalchim. And one of the mahalchim is guras asus, sheikeh ish, seder. But you have to use that. Why? Because there's no Dvar Hashem. By using that, you're going away from Hashem. No, you're not. Because Hashem announced that He's only doing machshava and not davar, which means He's going to be interacting with you and with you in a way that is invisible, which means to say concealed by some other mahalach, which is not the right Hashem, it's something else. Maybe it's guras asus, maybe it's sheikeh ish. However, you have to know that's not what Hashem wants. So if the Navi tells you now it's time for Hester, then apparently, even though Hashem doesn't want the guras of sheikh, is really what He wants is the achos tikva. But right now He's working through Hester, working through Galus, working through Shlomo Shamachos to get to achos tikva. And that's called machshavas because it really doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. You can't express it in the Dvar Hashem. The Nevi'im, the Yosef who went down to Mitzrayim with Pi Hashem loisha alu. So then, what are you doing? You're replacing the Dvar Hashem with machshava. That's basically saying that Hashem wants the guras asus sheikh. He doesn't want it. He sometimes accepts it b'di'evet, even though it's sheker, and even though it won't last. Okay, that is the answer. And that's why Yosef tells the Shvatim like this: Atem chashavtem alay ro'a lekim chashav l'tayva. There's a big difference between the Shvatim, between the Mitzrayim story and Babel's story. That's the difference. The difference. Babel's story is the Yirmiyah said in advance that Hashem has machshavas loy l'ro'a. In the Yosef story, the representatives of Hashem, which are the Bnei Yisrael, the Shvatim, the Nevi'im, who should have been Nevi'im, had machshavas rois. So the machshavas rois says no Dvar Hashem. So you start going down to Mitzrayim with the machshava ra. No one knows what they're doing. No one has any good plans over here, and you start embracing Mitzrayim. Terrible thing to do. Why should you do such a thing? Oh, the Mafreya. Yosef said the Mafreya Mitzrayim became like Bavel. Right now we know that was the Kim Machshava L'Taiva, but there was no Yirmiyah Navi. Or Yehuda Navi could have said. If Yehuda Navi would have said in advance, Hashem wants you to go down to Mitzrayim. So Yosef says, okay, but say it if you say so. It doesn't make any sense, but Hashem wants. And Yehuda would tell him, don't worry, Machshava Taiva. Say a shame. That's what's supposed to happen. That's what should have happened. Some everyone would have been just as happy, whatever. Yosef's dream would have come true, and I don't know, it could have made perfect sense. Yehuda could have told him, listen, here's how your dream's going to come true. We're sending you down to Mitzrayim. You're going to be a slave, and whatever. We're letting these Yishmaelim take you, and the Yisrael fine. That's what you say, right? You could have had a nevuah. Here's how your dream's going to come true. Thank you.
And you're going down, and you're going to prepare for whatever.
And it's going to be rough, and you can prepare the way, everything. Right, okay. So I just wanted to add one last thing to this point. Let's look at Mizmor Lamed Gimel. I think it's really alluding to the same things. Right, so that's Shleim Shamachas. In other words, have Mispala Shleim Shamachas when it's appropriate is when you recognize that there's no davar, right? And there's only machshava. So say this, what are you supposed to talk about? And what makes sense? What could you articulate? You could articulate Shleim Shamachas. But since you know that Hashem is hiding, since Hashem announced that He's hiding, so that means He's telling you don't look for the davar. The only way you could have the davar is through the Shleim Shamachas.
Because you won't otherwise get it.
Yeah, because there's nothing else is clear. Take a look at Mizmor Lamed Gimel.
Shleim Shamachas, and then you can have something akin to davar.
What?
You used to dream to make Shleim Shamachas, and you have something
akin to davar. An inkling of davar, right? Yeah.
The real davar comes when Yaakov comes.
Correct. Okay. Right, that's Vashiveni davar, and Aviv Shomar Asa davar. Everyone's waiting for the davar. And that's why Amos says that the Rav is not really a Rav Lalechem, the Rav is really a Rav L'Shmoy Dvar Hashem. And that's because if there's a Rav, that means someone's not articulating the Dvar Hashem, someone didn't find the Dvar Hashem, which is Chesed. That's what it says in Mizmor Lamed Gimel. Dvar Hashem Shemayim Nasu. So therefore, if everything is a davar, therefore, if there's a Rav, what do you need? You need more davar. Because davar is, everything is made by the davar. That's the whole Mitzvah Lamed Gimel. So therefore, he doesn't need Shekar Sus Shua. Because the Sus itself is only one manifestation of the Dvar Hashem Shemayim Nasu. So instead of being busy with the Sus, why don't you figure out how to relate to the davar, how to meet the davar. If there's a Rav, there's a problem, right? But the real problem when there's a Rav is we don't have the davar, because Dvar Hashem Shemayim Nasu. Everything is Dvar Hashem, so you need to find it. Okay, and there it says like this. There it says Hashem Hefer Atzas Goyim Heini Machshavos. So there also in Mizmor Lamed Gimel we have this contrast between the Goy Asher Hashem Elokav and the other nations. And there it says Machshavos Liboy L'Dover Dor. So the Machshavos Amim Hashem is Heini. Hashem does not like the Machshavos Amim, which are like the Sus, the Mahalach of anything but for the Mahalach of Hashem. Those are called Machshavos Amim. And Atzas Goyim. You know which H is permanent? Atzas Hashem. And Machshavos Liboy. And they are the Dor V'Dor. Asher Goy Asher Hashem Elokav. And here's what I think it means. That sometimes Hashem goes into hiding, as it were, and Klal Yisrael goes into hiding, right? Like they were in 70 years in Bavel. But Machshavos Liboy are the Dor V'Dor. That means when Hashem there was a midah of Machshava and not Dover, that's because his Machshava is La'olam. He has a long plan that even though it's not apparent now, he's playing the long game, Dor V'Dor, right? And that's what he does, Machshavos Liboy. So this Mizmor is alluding to this whole idea that is the Goy Asher Hashem Elokav Amba Lechel Nachal Eloi. They don't go with the Atzas Goyim and Machshavos Amim. They're stuck in Golas. Beseder, so they know Machshavos Liboy Dor V'Dor, but they know that Shekar Sus is Shua V'Chilei Malet. Even when sometimes they have to work with it. But the way, so it's not that working with the Sus Shua and working with the Sus is completely abgefrekt. It's not abgefrekt. But when you know. When you're in the mahalach of machshavos liboy Dor V'Dor, you have to work with Hashem's machshava. So the machshavos amim is that the sus is actually emes. That's the machshavos amim. But in the long term, the power of any kingdom is not going to last. So what's the only thing that lasts in the long term is the machshavos liboy. So machshavos liboy of Hashem, which masquerade through gvuras hasus shreik ish, that is what it's eternal. Because the only thing that's eternal is Dvar Hashem Shemayim Nasu. So any detail of that, such as you have to recognize is really a manifestation of Machshavos Liboy, which is Dor V'Dor, and then you can work with it. Then you spell B'Shem Shemachos.
That's Shalom. That's Shalom Shemachos.
What? That's
Shalom Shemachos. That's Shalom.
Yeah. It's like a quasi Shalom, right?